Boys and girls, we're going to talk a little bit with each other about place value of decimals. And we're working on lesson 3.2, which is about the place value of decimals. So our central question today is, how do you read, write, and represent decimals through the thousands? So we are going to do the real world unlock the problem together. The Brooklyn Battery Tunnel in New York City is 1 and 726 miles long. It is the longest underwater tunnel for vehicles in the United States. To understand this distance, you need to understand the place value of each digit in 1 and 726 thousandths. You can use place value chart to understand decimals. Whole numbers are to the left of the decimal point. We go down here, these are the whole numbers. Decimals are to the right of the decimal point. So we see that all of these numbers, boys and girls, to the right of the decimal point are decimals. The thousandths place is to the right of the hundredths place. Remember yesterday, boys and girls, we talked about this specifically. Tenths represents a dime, hundredths represent a penny, and a thousandth is so small it doesn't even get a coin. So over here is a picture of the Brooklyn Battery Tunnel Pass, which goes underneath the East River. So, boys and girls, we are going to use a place value in this first strategy. So we notice we put the 1 in the ones place, the 7 in the tenths place, the 2 in the hundredths place, and the 6 in the thousandths place. So now what we're going to do is we are going to figure out how do we know the value of that. So it says the place of the value of the digit 6 in 1 and 726 is thousandths. So the value of the 6 in 1 and 726 thousandths is 6 times 1,000, which would be equal to 6 thousandths. So if we notice here, boys and girls, this here we have 2 is in the hundredths place. Our first factor is 2. We multiply it by a hundredth because it's in the hundredths place. 2 times 1/100th is 2 hundredths. Now we look, boys and girls, here over here in the 7. The 7 is in the tenths place. So we take 7, we multiply it by a tenth, and we get 7 tenths. Now lastly, boys and girls, we have the 1. The 1 is in the ones place. So when you multiply 1 by 1, you get 1. So we have several forms that we need to be carefully understanding, because these are the ways we're going to read, write, and represent decimals, boys and girls. There is standard form, which looks like the decimal. Word form, where we write out in words 1 and 726 thousandths. And lastly, we have expanded form, which was what we practiced in this row. So boys and girls, the math talk at the bottom of this page says, how can the value of the last digit in the decimal help you read the decimal? Now we talked about this a little bit in class, boys and girls, but wherever the decimal ends in the place value chart, we think of that as being the decimal's last name. So we read this decimal normally, 1 and 726 thousandths. We say the word thousandths because the 6 is in the thousandths place. So boys and girls, we're going to try out our skills that we just worked on. We're going to write this number in standard form in word form. So boys and girls, whenever you see a decimal, you know it means the word and. So for word form, it would be 2 and 35 hundredths. Now, if we were to write this in expanded form, boys and girls, we would have 2 times 1 plus 3, because it's the next digit, times a tenth, because the 3 is in the tenths place value, plus the next digit in the decimal, 5, times the place value of the 5, which is 1/100th, which we represent as a fraction 1/100. So boys and girls, right off the back, we took the standard form, we wrote it in word form and expanded form. Now in example B, it's a little bit different because we're going to start from word form and work our way back up to standard form. So let's work on reading this together. 3 and, well, we know that whenever we hear the word and, it means the decimal point, 614,000. So we know that it is 614 thousandths, means it's a decimal. So remember, we know that that 4 should be in the thousandths place. Lastly, boys and girls, we're going to write it in expanded form. So our first digit is 3, so our first factor will be 3 by, we're going to multiply that 3 by 1 because the 3 is in the ones place. Next, boys and girls, we have the 6 digit, first factor, multiplied by 1/10 because the 6 is in the tenths place. The next digit we see, boys and girls, is 1. We're going to multiply 1 by 1/100th because it's in the hundredths place. And lastly, boys and girls, we see the last digit is 4. So our first factor is going to be 4. And we're going to multiply 4 by 1,000th because it is in the thousandths place. So boys and girls, we used standard, word, and expanded form to read and write decimals. Now be sure in your homework where it says to write 2 forms, you have to pick 2 forms. So if it's standard, you would have to write it in word and expanded. So now, boys and girls, we're going to use a different strategy. In this second strategy, we are going to use the place value chart to figure out how to read and write decimals. So we're going to read about the silk spun by a common garden spider. The silk spun by a common garden spider is about 3 thousandths millimeter thick. A commonly used sewing thread is about 3/10 millimeter thick. How does the thickness of the spider silk and the thread compare? So in order to compare those two values, boys and girls, step 1, we're going to write the numbers in the place value chart. So we write down 3/10, which represents the thread, and then we're going to write down 3/1000, which represents the spider's silk. Now, boys and girls, step 2. We're going to count the number of decimal place positions to the digit 3 in 3/10 and in 3/1000. So, boys and girls, there's 2 places here in 3/10, and boys and girls, there is 1, 2, 3, 4 places in 3/1000. So, boys and girls, it says count the number of decimal place positions in the digits. We did. 3/10 has exactly, boys and girls, 2 fewer places because we can visually see there's nothing here and there's nothing here. So it has 2 fewer places. 2 fewer decimal places, 10 times 10, boys and girls, would give us the number of 100. So 3/10 is 100 times as much as 3/1000. Now, boys and girls, we're going to look at the smaller decimal, 3/1000. 3/1000 is exactly 100th the size of 3/10. And if you think about this again as being money, boys and girls, 3 dimes, this doesn't even have any pennies over here. So we know that it is 100th smaller. So, boys and girls, the thread is 100 times thick as the garden spider silk, and the thickness of the garden spider silk is 1/100th of that of the thread. So, boys and girls, keep in mind, the closer it is to the decimal point, the larger the decimal is. So if you analyze here, boys and girls, you see 3/10, 3 dimes, is bigger than 0/10. So we know right off the bat that the thread is thicker than the spider silk. So boys and girls, we have one last little chart where we're going to work a little bit with regards to writing a number in different forms. So we're going to start with the number 3/10. So we see the blue number here says 3/10, and then we take 3 as the factor, and we multiply it by 1/10 because it's in the 10th place. Next, we see that there's 2 digits, 30 hundredths. So boys and girls, we're going to take that 30 and we're going to multiply it by hundredths because it's in the hundredths place. Now lastly, boys and girls, we have 300. But it's no longer 3 hundredths, it is 300 thousandths. So now, boys and girls, we are going to take 300 and we are going to multiply 300 by 1,000 because the last digit is in the thousandths place. So boys and girls, what we did was we just took that one same number and we represented it different ways. Think about this, boys and girls. Is 3 dimes equal to 30 pennies? It sure is. So make sure that you take the time to take some notes and post any comments under the comment section of this video.